In this video, I'm going to share 5 things that I learned from Dr. Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Amazing book, amazing read, the most valuable book I have ever read. Now, the first thing that I learned was the quantum field. I learned what it was and how to enter it. And so I'm going to share Dr. Joe Dispenza's definition of the quantum field with you. The quantum field is an invisible field of energy and information, or you could say a field of intelligence or consciousness that exists beyond space and time. Nothing physical or material exists there. It is beyond anything you can perceive with your senses. So in order to enter the quantum field, we have to meditate, because the way you enter the quantum field is through your heart. And so as you go into a meditative state, your brain waves drop, and you drop from beta to alpha to theta. As you drop into theta brainwave, you drop out of your head and you drop into your heart. This is when the ego goes quiet, you have no thoughts, and you just become pure consciousness. You have entered the quantum field and are ready to start using visualization, or what Dr. Joe Dispenza calls mental rehearsal. The second thing I learned was how to quantum shift reality. You must marry a conscious intention with an elevated emotion. So if you only have the conscious intention and no elevated emotion, it won't work. If you only have the elevated emotion and no conscious intention, it won't work. You must have both. And he talks about how thoughts are the electrical charge in the quantum field and feelings are the magnetic charge in the field. So the thoughts you think send an electrical signal out into the field, and the feelings you generate magnetically draws things to you. So together, how you think and feel produces a state of being, which generates an electromagnetic signature, which influences every atom in the world. The third thing I learned was that the body memorizes emotions. And this was probably the most valuable thing I learned in the whole book. So he talks about how the body is in control, not the mind. We think the mind's in control, and the mind was originally in control. The mind conditions the body then takes over. And so he talks about how the body memorizes emotions, and most of us are walking around with bodies that have memorized negative emotions like fear, anger, shame, guilt, victimization, unworthiness, lack, frustration. The list goes on. So we can have bodies that have memorized multiple negative emotions. Your body is basically running off an emotional program. It's a subconscious program. And this is why he says positive thinking doesn't work. Like when people tell you just to have positive thoughts and positive thinking, he says the positive thoughts will not override the program in the body. So this is why we have to work with our body, and we have to unmemorize these negative emotions and then rememorize positive ones instead. So you're basically taking out the negative emotional program in the body and replacing it with the positive emotional program. And when you do that, you will naturally feel positive because it's a subconscious program. And so at the end of the book, he takes you through a meditation process. He teaches you the meditation process for doing this, for unmemorizing the negative emotions and memorizing the positive ones. He also talks about how most of us spend 70% of our time operating in survival mode. And we shouldn't be spending our dominant amount of time in survival. When you're operating in survival mode, you're operating with survival emotions. So these are the lower emotions, the negative emotions, anger and fear, anxiety. And so this is why our bodies have memorized a lot of these negative emotions, is because we're spending too much time in survival mode. It's also like an example of this as well, like how the mind conditions the body is, let's say something happened, like you had an argument with someone and then you leave, but you're stewing on it. So you're thinking about this argument. The thoughts that you're thinking then generates feelings. So you start feeling negatively. You start like feeling the way you think. And then what happens is those negative feelings will then generate more negative thoughts. So then you start thinking the way you feel. You feel the way you think the way you feel. You end up in this cycle. And that's what's conditioning the body to memorize the emotions. So you don't want to be stewing on things like that, because that, like I say, it's conditioning your body. The fourth thing I learned was you change your life by changing your energy. So he talks about identity shifting. The way you think, feel, and act makes up your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. So if you want the personal reality to change, you must change your personality. And in order to change your personality, you must change the way you think, feel, and act. You must shift your identity. And so what he gets you to do is he gets you to become aware of how you think, feel, and act, your thought patterns, your emotional patterns, and your behavioral patterns, which are all subconscious programs. So we spend most of the day on autopilot, just running off these programs. So in order to shift your identity, you must become aware of these things. Like, you must become aware of how the old self thinks, feels, and acts. And then you recreate the new self, the new personality. How does that version of you think, feel, and act? And through the meditation process he takes you at the end of the book, he gets you to basically become aware of how the old self thinks, feels, and acts so you can unwire it. And then you become aware, or not become aware, but you recreate the new self and how the new self thinks, feels, and acts. And then he gets you to wire that in instead. So as you unwire the old self and you wire in the new self, you've shifted your identity, and then that's when reality will start shifting to mirror it. The fifth thing I learned was that we have 3 brains. I drew a picture here to show you, and I'm not the best drawer when it comes to the brain, but you'll get the idea. So the first brain is the neocortex. And this is that squiggly, walnut-looking part of the brain. This is your thinking brain. And then we chop the brain in half, and in the middle, we have the limbic brain, which is also the emotional brain. This is the doing brain. And then we have the cerebellum, which is the dark piece that's at the back. And that's your being brain. This is your subconscious mind. So we have thinking, doing, and being. And I'm going to share an example with you on how these 3 brains work that most people will be able to relate to. This is driving a car. If you've never learned how to drive a car, you can apply this to learning a new skill. So when you first start driving or learning to drive a car, you're using the neocortex. You're learning the road rules. You're learning how to operate the vehicle. You're using the mind and you're consciously thinking about it. And then you start doing. So you start getting out on the road, you start driving around, but you're still cautious because you're still new to the road and you're still sort of learning. And then through practice and repetition, through doing it over and over and over, eventually it becomes this natural state of being. It becomes second nature. It becomes a subconscious program. This is when the body has learned how to drive the car better than the mind. This is when you're able to drive a car and text. Not that you should. Or you can drive a car and drink a cup of coffee or eat some food or change the music on the radio. You couldn't do that when you were first learning how to drive the car, right? You were very much focused and concentrating on what you're doing because you're using the mind. But once it becomes this natural state of being, the body takes over. This is also why you're able to drive on autopilot, get to your destination, and you're like, I don't remember the drive. How did I get here? It's because the body was operating the vehicle while your mind tuned out. It's pretty cool. So what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about is how we can use meditation and visualization, or what he calls mental rehearsal, to go straight from thinking to being and skip the doing. And you can use this process to rewire your brain and reprogram your subconscious mind. So what he gets you to do through this meditation process that he teaches at the back of the book is as you go into a meditative state, you use the thinking brain, the neocortex, to visualize or mentally rehearse a scenario in your mind. So you could mentally rehearse something that you're wanting to create in your life. Let's say, for example, you want to have a successful business. So you mentally rehearse, visualizing this successful business, and then through practice and repetition of mental rehearsal, eventually it ends up becoming this natural state of being. It becomes a subconscious program. You could also use the thinking brain to mentally rehearse the new self. How does the new self think, feel, and act? And this can be really fun when you start recreating the new self. It can be a fun little exercise, right? How does the new version of me think, feel, and act? And so while you're in meditation, you're mentally rehearsing the new self. Through practice and repetition of doing this over and over every day, eventually it becomes a natural state of being. It ends up in the cerebellum, which is the subconscious. It becomes a new subconscious program. So what you're doing is you're literally using meditation and mental rehearsal to rewire your brain. So he gets you to unwire the old self, how the old self thinks, feels, and acts. He gets you to do that in meditation as well. Unwire the old self, rewire the new self. Eventually, it becomes a new subconscious program. So you're reprogramming the subconscious mind, and then the new identity becomes this natural state of being. It becomes the new subconscious program. Once it becomes a new subconscious program, it's in your subconscious. This is when reality shifts to mirror it. Again, you've shifted your identity by using meditation and mental rehearsal. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you got value out of it. If you did, let me know by smashing the like button or write a comment. If you like this sort of content, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification. I'm going to link another video here at the end of this one. That's a great follow-up video after this one, and that is how to create your dream life from the quantum field, inspired by Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings. I highly recommend watching that one. Have an awesome day. Peace.